Hello, everybody, and welcome to the final installment of Spooky Repot for 2022. You may be wondering why I am uploading this 2 months after Halloween, and I'm honestly asking myself the same thing. I felt ill at the end of October. That threw off the third episode. I just never finished it. And it just kind of got thrown onto the back burner. Once spooky season was done, I just wasn't feeling particularly inspired anymore. But I still wanted to put out a third episode because I just like having three. And I got a message a little while ago of somebody suggesting that I combine like a Christmas pot with the spooky stories. So kind of like a Nightmare Before Christmas, if you will. Ghosts of Christmas Past. Anyways, I thought that it was a great idea, and I started getting my creative juices flowing of what I was going to do for this one, and I think that the pot that I did is actually my favorite one that I've ever done, so let me show you. This is what it looks like. So I went with a pink, snowy candy cane and candy. These are supposed to be little candies. I feel like maybe you can't really tell, but I did my best here, folks. Anyways, I am so in love with how this turned out. I just think that it is so fun. I love the whole vibes. At first I wanted to do a bit of a like lighter, brighter pink, but it ended up coming out as just this kind of like rosy, almost like a terracotta pink, which is actually one of my favorite colors right now. So I'm very happy with how it came out. But yeah, I just love it. Like I said, I wanted something a little bit more playful, but still festive. So this is what I came up with. I just kind of made it up as I went. But yeah, like I said, I'm very, very happy with how this came out. So you will see me, oh my goodness, we lost a leaf. You'll see at the end of the video when I pot this plant into here, I ended up breaking off quite a few leaves actually. This is my begonia amphioxus, by the way. I think I was recently talking about this in a video as well, so you've probably seen her. And she really needed a repot, so it's actually perfect. But I did knock off some leaves, so I've got some propagations going now, and I've got a couple more in my prop box in sphagnum moss, so we'll see what happens with that. But yeah, this plant really needed a repot, and I thought that it paired perfectly with this pot. Like, how fun is this? It really gives me Grinch vibes, I think, because this plant is it's a Grinchy green, honestly. Like, it's a very kind of like neon, like chartreuse green. So I don't know, the whole thing kind of gives me Whoville vibes, and yeah, I love it. I love the Grinch, so I'm just calling this my Grinch plant now, and I'm very happy with it. I originally was just going to use this as a cover pot, but then I figured, you know what, this plant really needs to be up potted anyways, and I'll just keep it out year round. Not something I would normally do. I love having spooky stuff year round, but I'm not really like a Christmassy person, not to the point of having Christmas decor out year round, but I think that this is just cute and fun, so I'll see how it goes. We'll see how I'm feeling it once we approach around February. I did stake this using an Arca trellis, which I really love, and it's the iridescent one, so I think it kind of adds even more to like the fun whimsy vibes of this. So yeah, I'm really happy with how it turned out. Like I said, you guys will see me paint this pot throughout the video. The only thing that I didn't show on video is that I did use a clear sealant spray to kind of seal off this pot before I started painting, and also after it was done. So yeah, at the beginning and the end I used a sealant spray, but yeah, other than that, you will see me do everything. We can listen to some spooky stories together. I'm very excited to put out this final installment. I hope that y'all will enjoy. I understand a lot of people probably aren't into this at this time of year, but if you're like me and you like spooky things all the time, I hope that you enjoy. Leave me a comment down below. I would love to chat with you. And that's it. Let's just hop into the stories. Story number 1. I have 2 stories that are about a year apart, but both happened in the same room in the theater at Beloit College in Beloit, Wisconsin. My junior year, I was approached to stage manage the fall show. I was honored. Of course I said yes and knew I would do the job well, though I was super stressed. I also worked in the costume shop sewing costumes, so I was always in the theater. The play was staged in the Black Box Theater, and the box for the stage manager and light and sound operators was in a room that housed prop storage at the time. This room had a huge sliding glass window overlooking the black box theater. The rest of the room was filled with shelves and racks of furniture and everything else imaginable. During the second or third production, I was feeling knotted up in my shoulders and really wanted a massage. That's where I carry my stress, after all. I offhandedly mentioned this to the guys working in the booth with me, and we all agreed that we could use massages. This play had a long stretch where no cues were called, so my light and soundboard operators went downstairs to use the restroom and grab us all something to drink. I was alone in the room, watching the show through the glass. All of a sudden, I felt a mild pressure on my shoulders. This pressure intensified, but never felt scary or overwhelming. It was just calmly happening, and I knew it was the theater ghost giving me a massage. When I heard footsteps on the stairs of the guys returning, the pressure slowly lifted. I quietly said thank you and smiled. When the guys were back, I told them what had happened. They couldn't believe it. The following year, that space above the black box theater changed from prop to costume storage, and I became costume storage supervisor. Therefore, I spent a lot of time in that room working with the costume collection. One day, my assistant and I were reboxing some shoes and accessories. We had a ladder with scissors and packing tape, and we were building new boxes. There were about 9 old boxes full of stuff we were inventorying, repacking, and moving to the back of the room. At one point, I reached up to the ladder step where my tape and scissors were, and the scissors were gone. Weird. My assistant wasn't using them, and they were nowhere to be found, even though we had just been using them for the last 2 hours. So we just continued to rip the packing tape with our teeth and finish as quickly as possible. About 20 minutes passed, and I reached for the last full box of stuff. When I picked it up, my scissors were under the box. We had not touched that box all day. Actually, we had not touched that box in like a week. I laughed and told her about the ghost who had given me a massage in that room a year prior. We continued to work, making new boxes, and I put the scissors back on the ladder. 10 minutes later, they were missing again. Out loud, I said, "I love that you are playful and enjoy my company, but I just want to finish this project. If I walk away for a minute, can I please have my scissors back?" So I walked away, moved a few boxes to the new spot, and when I came back, my scissors were resting on the ladder. Whenever I make it back to Beloit College, I make sure to get into the theater just so I can say hi to my friend, the playful theater ghost. Story number 2. This story takes place in Antioch, California. When I was 10, I lived in a 2-story house that had an upstairs hallway balcony overlooking the downstairs living room. One night I had a friend sleep over, and we were sleeping in the living room. After falling asleep, I was woken up by someone whistling, and when I opened my eyes, there was an old woman staring down at me and smiling from the balcony up above. I let out a scream which woke everyone in the house, but my mother convinced me that it was just a strange dream. A few years later, we were moving out of that house, and my father found an old photo album that didn't look familiar, and inside were pictures from the 1960s when the house was originally built. While looking at the pictures, the hair on my body stood up as I held up a picture of an old woman smiling, the same woman I saw on our balcony all those years before. Story number 3. My freshman year of college, I lived in the dorms of the college that I went to, which was California State University, Channel Islands, originally built as a mental hospital and insane asylum. It was closed and renovated into a college campus, but parts of the mental institution remained and were closed off. One night, my friends and I decided to try to find an opening into one of the old buildings. We finally found an opening, and when we got inside, there was an old rusty bed frame, a broken sink, and a hand-drawn picture on the floor of a woman with no face. We were all on very high alert, and as we walked down an old hallway, we heard a door slam at the end of it, and it became very noticeably cold, to the point where we could see our breath. We all collectively decided it was a good idea to leave.
We finally got out of the building, but when we got back to our dorms, one of my friends said she felt like her back was burning, and when we lifted up the back of her shirt, she had a large red handprint on her back, much larger than any of our hands. The next day, she was violently ill and was so sick that she had to go to the hospital, where they couldn't find anything wrong with her. A few weeks later, she was back to normal. We suggested going back and seeing what else we could find, but she told us that since that night, she'd been haunted by a woman with no face and felt like the woman was trying to lure us back somehow. We laughed it off, but our friend was never the same after that night. She ended up dropping out of school, and we never heard from her again. Story number 4. We grew up in a small town outside Nashville, Tennessee. During my senior year of high school in 2010, Nashville experienced some of the worst floods in decades. Thousands were affected, and even though I didn't live within the city, my hometown received record amounts of flooding, so much that I, and my cousins, didn't go to school for a week because many back roads were washed out from the rainfall. The rain is important to this story because my cousins lived on a dead-end road with a cemetery. The rain had saturated the ground so much that the coffins and bodies inside were disturbed, causing them to wash out, and in some cases, expose the bodies out in the open. My cousins have always been able to see ghosts and paranormal activity for as long as I can remember. I don't ask them about it, but if they're willing to talk about it, I'll listen. During this particular week, the amount of unrest, not only from Mother Nature, but from the other side, caused a great deal of tension in the house. My cousin Jesslyn shared a bedroom with my other cousin, Angelia, and Jesslyn told me one night when she was lying in her bed, she heard moaning sounds coming from her bedroom door. They had a large window facing the front yard in their bedroom, and the moon was bright that night, as the rain and clouds had begun to clear. The moonlight was shining through her bedroom window, and as she turned her body to look at the door and the source of the noise, she saw what appeared to be a burned man crawling on her bedroom carpet in agony. The moonlight caught chilling details of his figure. The man had long hair, but with patches of it missing on his scalp. Parts of his face were gone, and my cousin could smell the awful stench of his burnt flesh. The burnt man desperately tried to reach for my cousin, but she was able to wake up my other cousin, Angelia, and turn on her nightstand light, just in time for the burned man to disappear before her eyes. The story continues because my other cousin Danny also experienced something strange the same week. She slept in the next room just over from Jesslyn and Angelia. During this same time frame where my cousins were all forced to stay home from the flooding, she told me she was up late in her room scrolling on her phone and saw something, a dark shadow, touching her glass perfume bottles on her dresser. She sat up and stared at her dresser, and heard the small bottles move back and forth, clanking against each other, until finally one of them tumbled to the floor, rolling into the moonlight coming from her window. As her eyes adjusted to the moon's light, she told me she saw what appeared to be a Native American shaman carrying a large staff, covered in bones and feathers, trying to reach for the bottle. She frantically turned on her cell phone light, only for the entity to disappear. That next morning, she put the perfume bottle back on her dresser, and something in her gut told her to read the ingredients in the perfume. And what most notably stood out to her was myrrh, a healing ingredient, most commonly used for medicinal purposes. She firmly believed the shaman could smell the myrrh and that he wanted to use it. My cousins told my aunt what they saw, and my aunt believed them because she can see ghosts too. Eventually, the county came to the cemetery and remodeled it, putting the coffins and bodies back to their proper resting places. To this day, my cousins will sometimes bring up the burned man and the shaman. We've all grown up, and my cousins have homes of their own, but they're convinced that the dead were disturbed from that flooding, and they decided to make themselves known. Story number 5. I grew up in Philadelphia, which is an old historical city, and I believe many of the houses are haunted. When I was really little, I lived in a very old house, and many strange things would happen often. I would always hear scratching in the walls and in the ceiling at night. I would also have very vivid nightmares and would feel the sensation of someone or something gripping my legs. I would wake up with hand marks on my legs the next morning. One night, I remember struggling to stay asleep because the nightmares were so bad. I decided to walk over to my parents' bedroom and ask to sleep with them, but as I was walking down the hallway, I could see two figures standing in front of my parents' door. One was tall, with glowing red eyes, and the other was around my height, with blue eyes. I was around 5 years old at this time. They were staring at me and watching my movements closely. And as I went to turn the doorknob, the one with the red eyes lunged at me, and the one with the blue eyes let out a blood-curdling screech. I froze in fear and screamed as loud as I could, and my dad opened the door and saw me standing there crying and shaking and asked me what happened. I tried to explain it as best I could, but I was too scared to speak. I guess after so many spooky things happened in that house to all of the family members, that was the last straw, and we moved out just a few weeks later. So many scary things happened in that house, and I'm glad we left. I never felt safe. Okay, this is just an anecdote from editing Fern, but this story caught my eye because something kind of similar happened to me when I was a little girl, very, very young. It's actually my only memory of my mom and my dad together because they divorced when I was only probably 2 to 3 years old. But I remember my parents were in the kitchen and I looked into the living room, which was dark because the lights were off, and there was a big black dog standing there. And what was strange and scary about it was that it had glowing red eyes. And I remember being so scared. And that's where the memory ends. It's a very brief, just like snippet of a memory. I honestly don't even know if it's real. I don't know where it would have come from. But yeah, it's something that has always stuck with me as a very spooky moment when I was basically a toddler. So this is how my festive little pot turned out. I'm super happy with it. A massive thank you to everyone who has submitted a story for Spooky Repot this year. I really appreciate it, and I hope that everyone has enjoyed the stories. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up if you liked it. Leave me a comment down below, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!